So you're a PT or PTA grad who's feeling the spark of something more. Maybe you dream of building your own business, one that's constructed around your vision, one that empowers you to make a real difference on your terms. This feeling, it's the entrepreneurial itch, and you're not alone. Countless PTs and PTAs are taking the leap to entrepreneurship, crafting careers that are as unique as they are. Welcome to the Innovate and Rehabilitate, the Entrepreneurial PT Podcast. In each episode, we'll dive deep into the world of PTpreneurship with inspiring physical therapists and physical therapist assistants just like you who are crushing it on their terms. We'll uncover their secrets, their struggles, and the incredible impact they're making. From building your PT boss dreams to navigating the business side of things, we'll equip you with the knowledge and inspiration to turn your vision into reality. So, whether you're just curious about starting your own business or you're already out there making your dreams a reality, this podcast is for you. Get ready to unleash your inner entrepreneur. Let's do this.
My name is Scott Giles, and I'm the founder of Score Builders and your host for today's podcast. I want to extend a special welcome to today's guest, Greg Knapton. Greg has a fascinating career arc that includes becoming a master clinician and opening and eventually selling a network of 5 physical therapy practices. Greg is already underway on his next entrepreneurial pursuit, which I refer to as Greg 3.0. This initiative is focusing on one-on-one physical wellness and rehabilitation. Greg's wife is also in the health and wellness industry, and they are busy parents to 3 boys. Greg's story offers a compelling case of how commitment to excellence, dedication, risk-taking, and innovation can lead to a fulfilling and rewarding PT career. Greg, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Scott, for having me.
Hey, Greg, it's funny because I've literally known you for over 40 years, which is kind of crazy, and I guess kind of dates us both. Although clearly I'm an older, but it's been interesting because we've kind of known each other peripherally, initially through a family friend, and that's how we came in contact when we were super young. But then, through athletics, your dad being a very successful basketball coach, then to you you went down south to practice clinically after you became a physical therapist, and then we're going to relocate back to this area. And I remember you contacted me and we talked a little bit. And then when you eventually opened your clinic, you would take students from the University of New England, where I was the DCE. And so I started to know your clinical practice through that. And then you hired a Score Builders original clinical instructor of ours or trainer of ours, Matthew Douglas, who eventually ended up running and still runs one of your clinics today. So I feel like through these periods of time over these 40 years when we checked in, I remember I was always kind of excited to be like, okay, Greg, what's going on? Well, what's your latest thing? And it seems like every time there was an update when we would run into each other. And again, recently we connected, and that's where I learned about, that you had sold your practice and you were moving on to this next phase, which truly is well underway. And I'm really excited about this opportunity because it's a little bit out of the box. So when I thought about doing this podcast, I absolutely thought you'd be a fantastic guest to have because of that career arc that we described. I think it'd be very interesting to our listeners. So again, thanks for joining me. So let's jump right in. So way back in the beginning, where you were just a youngster and were being raised by a wonderful family in Westbrook, Maine, how did physical therapy even get on your radar?
Well, to be honest with you, I kind of fell into it, I guess you could say. I was fortunate enough to go to the University of Vermont, and I was actually a pre-med student. Unfortunately, as I got into school, I realized that I didn't want to do another 14 years of this to become an orthopedist. And I knew I grew up athletically, and I knew I wanted to do something. And so I said, I didn't know a lot about physical therapy, but as I looked into it, I said, hey, I think this is something I wanted to do. As a first-year student at the University of Vermont, pre-med or PT, at the time, the program was a Bachelor of Science, so it was a 4-year PT degree. We had the same, chemistry, bio, everything. So it was about November of my first year of school that I realized that I didn't want to continue for a long period of time. I liked school, but not that much. And I transferred into the program and actually got into the program my sophomore year. And that's how I was introduced. I looked around. I went to a local practitioner in my town over Christmas break and actually made a decision that if I didn't transfer in at the University of Vermont, I was going to transfer to another school to go to do physical therapy. With the initial thoughts that I thought but I wasn't even kind of sure how much PT had to offer outside of orthopedics, which was also interesting as I went through the process.
Okay, no, that is interesting. So, all right, so now let's fast forward. You're coming out of school. You're ready to go into the real world. Did you have a sense? I mean, are you one of these? I mean, you're a pretty focused guy and very cerebral. And so, I mean, did you already have this kind of master plan kind of executed that one day you would own your own clinic, or where did you even start? How did your career progress?
I was just turned 22 when I got out of school, so we're pretty young, and I was more interested in what part of the country I was going to live in than what I was doing for work, to be quite honest with you.
Okay.
But I did know that I wasn't sure what part of PT that I wanted to do, and so I was set on finding a hospital or a company that provided rotations, and I thought that was very important. There is some knock sometimes on being an acute care physical therapist, but to be honest with you, that's where everything starts, right? You learn medicine, you're surrounded by a bunch of people. So I was fortunate enough that I knew I wanted to live in the Southwest. At the time, I know the States, Scott, but there was no internet. I took the back of the PT bulletin and said, "Oh, look, this is Arizona. Let me call this hospital. Let's call this hospital. See if they'll fly me out." And at the time, the environment was similar to today's environment, where it was pretty easy to get a job. And then I picked a hospital that my first rotation was wound care. And my first continuing education course I took was wound care. And then I did in hospital orthopedics and neuro, and did some skilled nursing. And that's kind of how I learned a lot of parts. But it was very important to me to divulge into learning from every aspect. The medicine aspect, what's this? Dangling someone in the ICU, and how that kind of forms how the body functions. And for me, that was important. And then as I worked through, I actually went on to travel therapy for a few years, and that's when I kind of knew, I think I want to do this orthopedic outpatient thing. And I was I was in just north of Cincinnati, Ohio, and I was working in a sports medicine clinic that the hospital just bought. And it was ACL post-ops. It was young people. It was older people with back pain. It was pretty high paced. I'm a fairly high paced guy, and I just loved it. And I said, this is what I want to do. And from there, I went on to do a fellowship in sports medicine that actually was a full-time 4-month program to get my athletic training certification through fellowship, and that was part of actually Health South and University of North Carolina. And then I knew, okay, my career is going to be in outpatient orthopedics.
Well, you made a wise choice, not just in orthopedics, with your knowledge base, but also, transitioning to physical therapy. I think early in the process ended up, obviously looking back, being a great move for you. So look, Greg, I worked in Southern Maine as well. I was at the university, and managing students, internships and all that stuff. And so, the clinics you want to go to and the clinics you don't want to go to, and the providers who just are exceptional. And I'm not trying to inflate your head, because you're a pretty confident guy already. But I mean, you're a stud. I mean, you are a fantastic clinician. I want to know, how were you? I mean, is this stuff just come easy to you? I mean, we were talking about something the other day, body related, and you lost me after the first 10 seconds of talking. So and it's real, it's real, and your reputation is outstanding. So I want to hear about how you became to be such a master clinician, what kind of mentorship you received, and maybe what recommendations you have, for people trying to differentiate themselves from other PTs.
I think the biggest thing, to step back a little bit, as far as academia, I probably finished in the middle of my class out of 35 people, but I did do very well in my clinicals, and I did exceeded in the clinicals. And one of the things that I found is, in this, I talk to my young therapists a lot, is that when you're working in customer service, this is no different than any other. You're dealing with people and their feelings and what they have, and to be open to understanding that you as the provider needs to adapt to the person. That person shouldn't have to adapt to you. And so when I talk about that, what does that have to do with physical therapy? The really good clinicians and people that not that I've learned from and been open to are athletic trainers, massage therapists, DOs, doctors. You learn the human body as a system, and you only get a really fraction of that in PT school. And you have to be willing to be open to say, yeah, I don't know that. I'm not sure that's right. How am I going to figure it out? I'm a pretty stubborn guy, and to try to figure that out. So in learning it and continuing the learning process, because to be honest with you, I've been doing this for 32 years now, and I only feel like I know a fraction of how the body functions. And I need to continue to learn that and adapt. And so for me, the development was not easy. I had there are three specific points in my early on in my career where I thought I was a stud until I sat down with my supervisor and said, "No, you're really not doing this great. You really need to improve on this." And you're like, okay, I'm okay with constructive criticism. I actually want to seek that out because if I really want to be better at this, and the hard part I always find is that you're going to get in trouble if you think you know everything because the body's too complicated. But being aware of the fact it's a continuing learning process. So for me, over the years, it was learning from colleagues. It was having the opportunity. You and I worked both at Orthopedic Associates to know you can walk next door to some of the best physicians in New England. And the kind of the aha moment that came to me as far as what we provide as physical therapists, which is different than doctors, is one physician told me once, Dr. Lincoln Avery, he said, look, a good PT can make a bad surgery good. A bad PT can make a good surgery bad. And it's teamwork. And the other piece that I was fortunate enough is in my fellowship, I worked with, had a chance to observe Kevin Wilk in Birmingham, Alabama, and how their physicians met with their PT on their post-op visits. And as physical therapists, we have so much more time than physicians with our clients. Even if you're in a busy clinic, even if you're in a super fast-paced clinic, you still have more face-to-face time than these physicians unfortunately don't have because of the system. True. So as I've grown through my practice, the big thing for me, Scott, was just to continue to learn and be open to something that might seem not quite you've learned, but there's something to it. And really judging it for yourself versus having other people tell you what it's supposed to be. Does that make sense? No,
that's great. Totally. And I love the mentorship piece. And you're right. If someone's not providing you feedback, because, even if you're the next coming of Berta Bobeth or Florence Kendall, I mean, this doesn't come easy. And there's no way you come out as a relatively novice PT or at any point in your career, really, and can't improve on something. And if someone's not feeding you that information, it's too hard to generate a real accurate assessment of yourself with the limited knowledge that we all possess individually. But surround yourself by great people and great things happen. So Greg, let's get into when you opened the clinic. I guess I assume you probably had a large trust fund, or that you were related to the Vanderbilts or Carnegies, or is that accurate? Am I correct?
Yeah, I grew up in a mill town. Let's just leave it at that. With two wonderful parents that were teachers, so we're all good.
So how did this happen then? I mean, because a lot of people with any entrepreneurial activity, one of the big barriers is, look, I have a ton of debt. I have no capital. This is not something I can do. All kinds of people would like to own their own clinic or run their own business. Right. But so tell me about that. How did you overcome that obstacle?
In my personal life as well, I'm a pretty fiscally conservative guy. Some people might call me cheap. I say I'm frugal. Whatever.
It's a Mainer.
Exactly. So as I was looking at the process, I think the realization came back when I started my process. It really was how relationships affect the world. And I'll give you an example. When I was working in Portland, I was very fortunate, got to work with these great doctors, and you build relationships and you build trust, and they start trusting in you and helping them, and it's a teamwork effort. And I left that office in 2001, May of 2001, to run another Health South office in Brunswick, which is it's about 45 minutes away from Portland. And to give what was kind of an eye-opening moment is that the doctors from the Portland office were one of the regional orthopedic doctors, really good physicians there. And when I became the director of this office, so you saw the numbers and all that stuff. And what it looked like is in the same 6-month period, and this had nothing to do with the fact that I treated these clients, but the number of referrals from the Portland office to the Brunswick office, PT office, doubled in a 6-month period. And it went from 45 the year before to 90 in 6 months. I didn't see those people, but what all of a sudden, this physician's like, oh, you live halfway between? Oh, why don't you try Brunswick? So-and-so's up there. And you realize that, okay, this is about relationships and providing a quality service and someone entrusting you. And so in this space between Brunswick and Portland, there was kind of a gap at the time in the early 2000s of not too many PT clinics. And so I'm like, you know what? There's nothing halfway between in a town called Yarmouth. There wasn't at the time, at least. And I was like, I think I want to see if I can open my own practice. Again, getting back to I'm not a high risk taker. I'm pretty conservative. So I went to a friend of mine who had his own clinic, sold it, and then went back to in partnership with the company called US Physical Therapy. And that was a fit for me. It's not a fit for everybody. There are going to be people that are much more risk averse and just say, hey, I'm going to do this and not worry about it. I knew that there was too much about the business end, insurance, compliance, that I didn't know. And I wasn't willing at the time when I was doing this. My wife was pregnant with our third child. Good timing, huh? And I said, I need to have a little bit more support. And so my friend Jason was involved with US Physical Therapy at the time, which is a publicly traded company. And I had 22 excellent years with them. And it was the best decision for me that I made. And so how it works is at the time is you're in a limited partnership with them and they provide you with the support. And so because the area we went in, and I opened up and saw my first client in March of 2002. And it's truly a partnership where I'm the local provider. My company at the time was named Yarmouth Physical Therapy because we're in Yarmouth. And then when I opened more clinics, we changed it to Riverview. And it worked so the point that I had support through them, and we had like-mindedness, volume, and that's the hard part. You have to find that. Is it ideal if you could treat everybody for one-on-one for an hour? Yeah, it's ideal. Unfortunately, and not a lot of physical therapy schools have the time because they're doing that educate you on the economics of healthcare. You have some, right, and some, and I'm not bashing on schools because there's a lot you have to get in, but it's one of those that us as a profession is facing reimbursement reductions, and quite a long time. A friend of mine used the analogy once that if your washing machine dies and you have a serviceman come in, and their fee is $75 to walk in the door, and I turn around and say, I'll give you $25.50. But that's all I'm giving you. That's kind of sometimes the relationship we have with insurance companies, where do I take this provider or not? So it was very good, and that's how I chose to do that. And I would say we had a modest, although through the 22 years, we roughly averaged between 10 and 12 visits a day per clinician, really 10 to 11.
It's manageable.
Which is manageable. And it's manageable if you have a skill set that you can draw from. It's hard in this setting, depending on your skill set. And as new grads, what we like to do is we would usually have new grads start with one client an hour and work their way in and get comfortable and move from there. So that's kind of how I chose the direction of going to be in a partnership situation, because it was for me at the time, it was much more risk protected. So.
Right. No, but it's great that, look, that's a long relationship, 20 plus years with this company, and and you're looking back at it, and it was wonderful. You felt supported. You were able to do the things that you were best at, and that's treat patients and train your staff to have the same level of excellence that you have. And then US Physical Therapy did much of the administrative work, much of the things that, there's so many compliance and regulation things. It's, I can't imagine. I mean, that would be the major barrier to me to even consider, the possibility of opening a clinical practice. And, but so I guess I'm just kind of picturing how this goes at the dinner table at your household. Oh, honey, it's crazy. I know, we're both working so much, and I know your wife does a lot of work with LL Bean fitness wise, and, all has her own business. And I mean, look, you're a busy guy, and the kids are probably climbing all over you. You have 3 kids at that point. And you're like, this is good, but I think I'd like to open another clinic. Like, I could just picture at my dinner table, like I literally might have to duck. I mean, Greg, I'm an idea guy, and I'll sometimes at dinner be like, hey, Trace, I have an idea I want to run by you. And she'll just look at me like right away, like, seriously? Like, and sometimes it's like, not tonight.
Yeah,
what I mean? And my wife, and she is very supportive. But how do you pull this off? I mean, it has to be like going from no children to one child to 2 to 3 to 4. I mean, you have 5 clinics, Greg. How are you managing this? How does this work?
I couldn't have done it without awesome staff. I will put that out there that I had a very excellent relationship, and the leadership at US Physical Therapy was awesome. It was truly the vice president of ops, Daryl Gottwald. He and I are good friends and direct report. But if even through the pandemic and some personal things that happened to my staff over the years, the CEO Chris Redding, who's been there for 20 years, would call me on the cell phone, and I couldn't have done without the support, and I definitely couldn't have done without fantastic staff that I had locally. You were friends because you worked with Matt Douglas, as we spoke about. I've known Matt Douglas since 3rd grade, and I was fortunate enough to be able to play basketball with him all the way through high school. And I talked Matt in after the first year to come work with me, and I said, yeah, it's really, it's slower pace, and it's great, and we had and I always wanted to work with him. And a funny story on this, and this gets back to relationships. His clinic was probably 30 minutes from the Yarmouth clinic where he's currently working with, and it was, I had a younger PT that moved on after the first year, and I really tried to win after Matt because he's a great guy, great clinician, and he was a leader, and to the point was, even though his clinic was 30 plus minutes, he brought 12 patients with him the first week that traveled and followed him over. So that tells you the type of guy and clinician he is. Yeah, he's the best. And then he's like, you lied to me because we're really busy, and it scaled pretty quickly. And my first mindset, I was just going to do one clinic, but because I had the support of my silent partner, and because I had on board, I've got someone that can run an office and allow him to take that over. I was about 25 minutes from my home at that time, and I was driving down the road, and I saw a for lease sign within a mile of my house. I said, I want to put a clinic in my own town. And so I got the support of USPH. And then, to be honest with you, the step after that one was a little bit of a push from US Physical Therapy to open my 3rd one. But the person that I hired to replace me that moved to Yarmouth wanted to open a clinic, and he opened one up in Bath. And then in another situation 4 years later, so the first one was 2002, 2003, 2004, then 2007. And because of our reputation we had for quality, and because of relationships, and because of my awesome staff and awesome clinicians, we opened another office for a local PT that came to work for me, and then actually subsequently he's actually opened his own practice, and he was a Score Builders teacher for a while, Mike Smith, and so yeah, sure. So the relationship comes through of, if I didn't have staff in place that were the quality that they were, and just hard workers and awesome front office staff, because getting back to when you're running, it's the first person someone calls when they go to a clinic is their front office, and it's how you interact and how you treat people personally. That's what they're going to remember. And if you combine the fact that if you're a good person and a good people person, and then you add on top that you're a good clinician, the great ones can do both, right? I always say this, the great ones are great interpersonal skills and high level of knowledge to be able to adapt. So as you're starting into your career, it's not, you don't have to know anything but how to treat someone nice, and you can already you already have an edge up, in my opinion. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
that's the absolute core foundational piece. And Greg, you want to know how small a world this is? And by the way, folks, this is not because we both are in Maine. Okay, this is not a Maine thing. This
Yeah.
is an everywhere physical therapy thing. Matt Douglas, who we're talking about, who runs your clinic, who is a Scorebills instructor.
And actually, to be honest with you, Scott, it's when I stepped away. Actually, it's Matt's now the partner. So Matt's, which was nice to be able
love.
to do.
And another of your long-term employees is also
Chris Hughes.
the partner who's been with you
Yeah.
nearly 20 years. Yeah, that's incredible. I love that part of it. But what I was going to say is that Matt Douglas went to Springfield College, as I did, and Matt is considerably younger than I am. But my wife was Matt's clinical instructor on his neuro rotation at New England Rehab Hospital. So come on. I mean, every person I have on the show talks about relationships and people. And again, it's not a main thing, it's an everywhere thing. So You're right. The most critical thing is you're a good human being, and you certainly are, and so are your employees. Okay. So look, this is all milk and honey. Like, why did you decide to sell? How did that get on your radar?
The big thing is, healthcare has changed, and it's tough. We're in a marketplace where it's hard to find clinicians, just because there's a shortage. There's been as we're all well know, there's been a lot of changes in this country and world in the last 4 years, and it's changed perspectives a little bit. It wasn't all. I mean, I worked a lot. I pride myself as a clinician first, and lucky enough to own a business with some awesome employees. I did see the highest volume, and actually Matt and I saw the highest volume out of any of my clinicians. And someone once told me, "You're the boss. Why don't you sit in the office?" I'm like, "Because I'm a clinician, and this is what I do." And when you live in the same town that you grew up in and you raise your kids in, all of a sudden, everybody's like, "Yeah, you can get me in. Let's go." And I have a hard time saying no, because if I see you on a Thursday and what we did helps you, I want to somehow see you Friday so you feel really good by Monday. I don't want you to wait for 4 weeks to get in. And that's just the mentality of, it wasn't driven monetarily. It wasn't driven because, I'm going to make more money getting it. It was driven because I can help you, and if I do it in a fashion where go and we get you in quicker, we're going to be able to have better outcomes. It was a lot of hours. I was finding myself, starting to get a little short as a leader, and I'm not like that. Getting a little impatient. And so talking to my wife, and it's like, what, it may be time. And we talked. It was March of 2023, and my wife and I said, I think we can make this new venture work. My youngest just graduated from college. My boys are now all basically in the transition of their own life, and I've worked hard on my clinical skills and knowing what we do and relationships, and I had an opportunity to go into a new phase. And the new phase is still doing some PT stuff, but it's more in a fitness wellness base, and it's cash based. And selfishly learning, I just was certified through Titleist Performance Institute as a medical provider. I'm addicted to golf, and so I kind of did it to help clients, but also to help myself. And then also,
Greg, let's stop right there for a minute, because that may be the most brilliant move of all the things you've ever done. Because now every time I can picture it now, what are you doing today? I'm headed out to the golf course. I'm doing some marketing.
Yeah.
I'm doing some swing analysis. I'm working on, and I don't even want to know how many rounds you played this month.
A lot.
But I love, it makes sense, right? I mean, your understanding of the body, like, you can be a golf pro, but you don't have the level of understanding. And by the way, I think many golf pros have exceptional kinesthetic awareness and are great teachers and everything else. But the bottom line is, you are an expert on human movement. Right. And then in addition now, I believe well, I know that you have an arrangement with another individual who has space, and that you're now seeing people, including myself, which actually, Greg, might be the biggest project you've undertaken in your history of your career. I'll just tell you in advance. And people are following you, and it's cash based, and people value skills today, and that's why I feel at some level that this is a much better entrepreneurial environment than it was way back in the day when you and I graduated, because people want to see clinicians who can distinguish themselves, who can get them better. People have very large deductibles in some cases, or don't have much physical therapy and coverage to begin with, and they're looking for excellence, and you're still now able to do that on your schedule. You said you're addicted to golf and health and wellness, and you can kind of call the shots now, but maybe even make a bigger impact than you were making day in and day out in the trenches. So, and what has it been like letting go of the clinic and now being in this new phase of your life?
I mean, I'm doing mostly the fitness stuff, which is great, and using your skills. And so, and I'm not seeing, I'm selfishly not, but part of it is I have a transition that I have to go through, right? And period. And one thing I said when I leave is that I don't want to have to deal with insurance companies anymore. But even, I think, Scott, you can we affect people as PTs, and you can make a big change. And it can come from the fact that you're a provider, that you listen to the person. You're taking the time to learn. As physical therapists, we're affecting pain, lifestyle. You can make some significant changes. I mean, one of the biggest changes for me and how I am, and we've talked a little bit about this with you and I interacting, is my exposure to postural restoration 20 years ago. And how that taught me how to look at the system and the body, and appreciating the mental health piece of it and all that stuff. And so why I bring with that is that even when I was busy, I feel I worked really, really hard on individualizing that program for that person, and when you're in a clinician, and you and I both worked in, I always harped to my clinicians and myself, is that you're coming in here. I don't want to watch you do your home program. That's not what we're doing. You need to add value by educating the client, teaching them how to take care of themselves, teaching them what the diagnosis is, and what is going on, and how can I take care of this. And there's got to be buy-in, right? Because even in a clinical setting now, you're looking at $75 copays, and you're looking at these costs. And so you have to add value if someone's going to get rid of whether it's going through insurance or paying cash. It needs to add value. You're not going to go back to that restaurant if the food's awful and the server never paid attention to you. But you might go to your local restaurant or local bar, and you might go once a week because you have great conversation with the bartender or the server, and the food is awesome, and they're on time, and they appreciate you. And so that's adding value, right? Now we're talking about taking care of our body and how we can function. What it's allowed me right now, Scott, because I'm really not working a lot right now, which is okay with me. And sometimes as I've gone through this transition, which is really funny, people said, because I'm a fairly high energy person, I've always been go, go, go. And they said, oh, you must be bored. How are you doing the transition? I hate to say it, but I feel like a different person. But what I did in January after I left is, I'm also a runner. I ran in college. I have a fantastic group of people I run with. I am just turned 54 the other day. I'm the youngest person in my group. There are guys that they're 75, 73, and we were doing an interval track workout yesterday morning, and I kind of helped that. But I divulged myself into things that I did not take the time to because I was pulled away from this and that. Yeah. I learned about aerobic capacity more. I learned about what we're going to do, and I learned about Zone 2 training. I've done talks on Zone 2 training. What's really neat, I've done some talks with another friend of mine who we have mutual relationship with, Hayes Sweeney, who has 3 clinics, and I did some lunch and learns and talked about postural restoration. And so just really taking the time to learn and working on my own sleep habits and health and fitness because, I'd like to live till I'm 100. That would be awesome, as long as I'm healthy.
Sure.
And then also learning about the golf process selfishly because I'm addicted to it, but also to be able to translate that. So, but what's it allowed me to do is another friend of mine who I respect highly, Michael Mullen, who introduced me to posture restoration, is that there's less white noise now when I work with someone,
Okay.
and your skills are more fine-tuned, even more so, right? You don't have to worry about those emails. You don't have to worry about Medicare coming on your door to do an audit. You don't have to worry about so-and-so didn't show up to work today. I have, you and I have interacted once, and it's an hour of having a straight conversation and getting to know. So when you've built your skill set, now all of a sudden it's like, wow, my luggage is all organized. It's not just one mess, right? And so you can pull on that. Does that make sense? That analogy make sense?
Yeah, it does. I like the luggage analogy too, and I could just picture myself many times when you have things going on and you have employees and you have for us instructors all over the country and you have deadlines and you're trying to focus on a given task, but you're right, there's all these other things buzzing. So I kind of like the now you can go carry on, right? Instead of checking 4 big bags. And that has to improve the thought process. But Greg, here's the thing that I love. I love the fact that, look, you put in, and by the way, you saying you're not working a lot is probably still working quite a bit for a normal human being. Okay. So that's number one. So I don't want people to think you're just having, margaritas, on the beach.
Yeah.
But, you put in the time, you became a master clinician. You started a venture that was, I don't know, but I'm sure very profitable, and you did well. And now you can eliminate some of that white noise, and you've built this reputation where people are still knocking on your door. You're going to be as busy as you want to be without all the white noise, and can pursue whatever you're passionate about, which probably 2 years from now will be something different than you're passionate about today. So that's why I love your career arc, because you've earned it, you've put in the time, and now you can pursue things that are truly meaningful to you. Greg, I ask all our guests this question because I love the podcast, the NPR podcast, How I Built This. And the question that's asked on that show is always, when reflecting on your business activities, how much of your success do you attribute to luck, and how much is attributed to intelligence and hard work?
I think that's an interesting question. I think it's a combination. Luck in the sense of, if you believe in fate, time. Why did I move back to Maine at the time? Why did Matt Douglas talk me into coming to work at OA? I think there's luck in the fact of you made a decision that there was a fork in the road and you took this road, and put you in a position. I think hard work is building the relationships and taking advantage of those relationships, and not taking advantage of a person, but using those relationships to help you move forward.
Sure.
And I think in working on in whatever you decide to pursue, get really good at it, because just make people find an excuse not to have to go see you, and if they can't find one, then you're really good at what you're doing. Does that make sense? And so so if you are really good at something and you've had good relationships, you're going to be successful in whatever you do, in my opinion. But you have to be willing to put in the time, and I love the fact that people want to do entrepreneurial things and come out of school. Just have the self-awareness that you have to really surround yourself. If you're going to go out on your own as you're new, your knowledge base, you haven't had enough time and experience through clinicians and clinics and patients, and to really have those things that turn the wrong way, and how do I deal with this activity? And I think it's great. If someone decides to do that, that's great. But just have the self-awareness that you better make sure you surround yourself with people that you can refer to help when needed. And I think it was a combination of that, luck and I think hard work and what you put into it.
And maybe we've touched on this, but I mean, kind of in closing thoughts, I mean, what do you see the profession of physical therapy looking like 10, 15, 20 years down the road? And what can new graduates and individuals in school, like what can they do as individuals to better kind of prepare themselves for this, highly competitive, demanding market.
It's, in the light right now, I mean, there are a lot. I think this new graduates that are coming out have a choice, right? And they have a choice because there's such a demand. I mean, you're looking at the state of Maine, Scott. I believe we're one of the oldest, if not the oldest, state in the country as far as age-wise. Correct? I mean,
Yeah.
and that's people are living longer. There are a lot more people that are worried about their health. I mean, there's going to be a turnaround in that piece, and they're healthy and they want to be healthy. And so physical therapy plays a huge part of that in all aspects, home health or in rehab or even outpatient or whatever it may be. You definitely want to be able to help people, and you want to be able to help them in what they do. You just need to make sure that you're in an environment that allows you time to learn and grow into your craft. Um, Kind of the outpatient orthopedic is the cool thing to do. You and I have both worked in a setting. It's not easy. There's a lot of things going on.
Sure.
There's time, and not everybody can multitask. And I'm not saying we should have to, but there is some financial pressures with reimbursement that need that, and you got to find out let's give value to what you need to do. So I think I don't want to put a guess out there what's going to happen, because I think our healthcare system in general is under distress. And it's not just physical therapy. There are lack of providers. There are family doctors that are leaving. We're in a situation. So I think, as an entrepreneur or as a young PT, I think you're going to be able to pick and choose, but just make sure you're learning and growing in every step you take. And you can learn just as much in a bad situation as you can in a good situation. Hopefully you're in a good situation, because in a bad situation, you're going to learn, like, yeah, I don't want to do this again,
Yeah.
But building that piece of I find in relationships and in career success, it's a process and it takes time. And I think in our day and age where everything is instant, it's hard to wrap your head around that. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. It's just, it's hard to be patient in that, because knowledge takes a long time.
It is, yeah, and certainly I can relate to that, because patience is not my best virtue. But I do think I love what you're saying, especially to new grads, because they do have a choice because of this market, but they're also under just immense pressure from, in large part, due to the student loan debt. Yeah. And that, and the cost of everything, right? Inflation, the cost of housing, the cost of just living is such that it's problematic. And so I think what Greg and I are both kind of advocating, which I've heard from some other guests, is that you really want to play the long game. You want to put yourself in the situation that is that mentoring situation where you can grow and you're going to be nurtured. And yes, money matters, but that the reality is you've been poor for a long time now if you're just coming out of school, right? Okay. And what's a little more, I always like to say, what's a little more oodles and noodles? What's a little more mac and cheese? You know what I mean? Like play the long game and put yourself in a position that you can distinguish yourself. And then things will happen on your career arc that are just as interesting as, what Greg just described during this podcast. So, I think patience and a well-reasoned, no job is forever. So if you get into a situation and it sounded wonderful and it's not what you thought it would be, then, maybe you want to look around. And conversely, if you get into a situation and you kind of have an urge to bust out, but you're learning, incredible amounts of information, your clinical skills are just exponentially improving, you maybe want to hang out in that area a little bit longer, because it will pay off down the road. So anyways, like so many things in life, I think playing the long game can really provide you with all kinds of opportunities, because again, 5 years from now, there's going to be opportunities in physical therapy and for physical therapists that Greg and I can't even sit here and imagine. And that's super exciting to me. And again, that's one of the reasons we want to do this podcast. Hey, Greg, I want to really thank you for taking the time.
I appreciate it.
I really hope that this isn't going to mean you can't play 9 holes today.
I'm going to get 8. I get 18 in. Don't you worry.
You're absolutely killing me. But no, seriously, I have a lot of respect for you and what you've built, and you deserve all the good things that have happened to you. So continued success, and thanks for joining us on today's podcast.
Thank you, Scott.
You're welcome. Thanks to all of our listeners for tuning in today. We'll be back in a couple weeks with another podcast. Have a great day.
And there you have it, another dose of PT-preneurial inspiration to fuel your journey. Check out more inspiring stories from PTs and PTAs out there making waves by listening and subscribing to our podcasts on your favorite streaming platforms. And don't forget to rate and review this podcast. Thanks for listening.